Parents pushed me to make my sister my maid of honor, but she ditched my wedding to marry my groom's cousin and now demands I help sue him for damages. So for context, I got married last week, and on the day of my wedding, instead of being there for me and fulfilling her duties as maid of honor, my sister was getting married as well. My younger sister, Michelle, 24 female, and I, 27 female, had a very weird hot and cold relationship where if we are getting along, it's great, but if we are fighting, we are going to take it to extremes. This is how it's always been with us, but deep down, we have always had love for each other, and I guess that's why we were still able to be in each other's lives in spite of our frequent disagreements. It was kind of toxic, now that I think about it, but it is what it is, and even after we moved out of our parents' home, we made an active effort to stay involved in each other's lives, even though sometimes we got on each other's nerves. The main reason behind our fight, in my opinion, was the fact that we were really very different as people. She was a bit of a wild child, always had been, and I had always been the polar opposite since I was quite type A about everything and liked to plan ahead and stay responsible, which are not things that she is very good at. But in spite of our differences, I decided to ask her to be my maid of honor when my parents suggested that idea to me, since that would strengthen our bond, and I agreed with that, after some convincing on their part. I have been with my husband for the past 4 years, and earlier this year, we got engaged. I didn't really have any intention of having a lot of bridesmaids and a maid of honor, and I kind of wanted to do away with the idea altogether because if I'm being honest, I don't really have a lot of close friends. It's a personal choice, and also, I'm not really good at keeping in touch. So it's not like I don't have any friends at all, it's just that the ones that I do have are not close enough to be my bridesmaids or whatever. That is why initially, I did not plan on having bridesmaids at all, and my husband also agreed with that because we wanted a small, intimate and simple wedding. But when my parents suggested the idea of making my sister to be my maid of honor, I got around to liking that idea after they started convincing me that it would be really nice, and eventually, they wore me down. And when I asked her, she agreed immediately, and I didn't really have any bridesmaids, but I figured that Michelle would be enough for me. The past couple of months of wedding prep and everything had been really fun, and I had been getting along well with Michelle too, so I really never would have imagined her pulling off what she did on the day of my wedding. On my big day, she decided to thank me for making her the maid of honor by ghosting me and showing up in the evening, after everything was over, with her new husband. And her so-called new husband had turned out to be my husband's creepy cousin who has been divorced twice, Josh, 36 male. I'm not just calling him creepy because he had apparently been hitting on Michelle throughout the days leading up to the wedding, and it was kind of gross because she was a whopping 12 years younger than him, and it hasn't even been a month since his divorce was finalized. I'm calling him creepy because he has a history of making women uncomfortable, according to what my husband has told me. Just for the record, he had not been invited to the wedding because my husband does not get along with him, and neither does anybody in the family really like him, except for his parents. But we had made the mistake of inviting his parents, and 2 weeks before my wedding, we had hosted an informal brunch for just our families. For some reason, Josh's parents, my father-in-law's older brother, and his wife had decided to bring him along. That's how he and Michelle had met for the first time, because we had to stay, even though we hadn't specifically invited him and had just invited his parents. We did not want to ruin the vibe of the afternoon by picking a fight with anyone, and as long as he was not creeping anyone out, we were not going to kick him out. Even that day, I had noticed that Michelle was sitting beside Josh the entire time, and there was a bit of flirtation going on there. I was not fine with it because I knew what kind of a person Josh was, and I did not feel good about him getting close to my sister, but I just figured that it was a one-day thing, so I did not say anything about it. I did not bring it up with her later on either because I was too busy, and also because I did not think it was worth it, since like I said, I did not figure that it would turn into anything serious. And I did not think that she would see him again because, after the brunch, my father-in-law had spoken to his brother, and had told him that while we had not said anything about them bringing Josh to brunch, they would expect him not to attend the wedding since he had not been invited, and my husband and I only wanted our close friends and family members to be there. Since Josh wasn't particularly close to my husband, they would expect him not to show up, and from what I know, his parents were not happy about it, but they agreed to respect our wishes. Honestly, after the brunch, we didn't even want them at the wedding, but we did not want to create any drama, so we didn't say anything afterward. What nobody knew was that Michelle and Josh had exchanged numbers, and they had been texting each other every day, ever since they had met each other at brunch. She hadn't told me about it because I was too busy with my wedding prep and stuff, and I had asked because I didn't really think anything was going on. If she had brought it up with me at any point, I definitely would have told her that Josh was not the right kind of guy for her and would have wanted her to know about him. So I really don't see how it's my fault that she got carried away while talking to him and he convinced her to ditch my wedding so they could get married. 5 days before my wedding, Josh had applied for a marriage license, and then, he started to talk her into it, and by the night before my wedding, she had been fully convinced. He thought that he was making the day iconic by getting both sisters married on the same day, and my sister was stupid enough to fall for that rubbish. Anyway, on the night before my wedding, Michelle literally took off in the middle of the night so she could go to Josh, and nobody even knew about it until we checked with the hotel authorities, and they confirmed that she had checked out the previous night. Before that, I had been worried sick because we couldn't find her on the morning of the wedding, and her room was empty, and neither was she responding to any of our texts or phone calls. However, after speaking to the staff and confirming that she had left, I decided to go ahead with my wedding because it was clear that I was being ghosted and I was obviously not her first priority that day. She had completely disregarded the relationship that we had had, and I decided to go through with the wedding without her. I was kind of upset about it, but, thankfully, my husband and my parents cheered me up, and by the time everything was done, I had almost forgotten about Michelle. When she finally returned in the evening with Josh and explained everything, I totally lost it at her, and I told her that I wanted nothing to do with her anymore because due to her irresponsible behavior, my wedding had almost been ruined. And she even had the audacity to act like I was overreacting because apparently, she had expected me to be happy that she had found the love of her life and was married now. If I'm being honest, the only people who were happy about that marriage were Michelle, Josh, and Josh's parents. It was bad enough that they had gone through with the wedding on the same day as me and ghosted me. It was worse than Michelle and Josh, and even his parents expected us to be happy for them. We got into a really bad verbal fight that evening, after which all of them left the wedding angrily, and we hadn't been in touch with them since, and I was more than fine with that if I'm being honest. Anyway, now it has been a week since both of us have been married, and while it has been a great week for me and my husband, I can't say the same for Michelle because last night, she showed up at my house with her because she was miserable with Joshua. Apparently, he was not the guy that she had thought he was going to be, and the past week had been bad enough for her to realize it. While he had been very charming for the past 2 weeks, when he was trying to get her to marry him, he hadn't told her anything about his past. She had no idea that he had been married twice before already, and she didn't even know that he was 12 years older than him. He had significantly reduced his age while speaking to her, and she thought that he was in his early 30s. It also helped that Josh is kind of blessed with good looks, even though I can't deny that, so she believed him. But a couple of days after their marriage, he started to tell her everything, and she also started to find out that he had been bluffing about how rich he was. He had invited her over to meet him a couple of times while they were talking, and she thought that he was really well because he had been inviting her over to one of his friends' houses to meet her, just so he could impress her. But after they got married, she had moved into his apartment, which was just really tiny and not even in a good neighborhood. And the worst part of all of this was that she had found out that he was high the entire time. I'm not even joking. He had been high when he started flirting with her at brunch. He had been high when he applied for a marriage license. He had been high when he asked her to marry him and started convincing her to skip the wedding, and even while they were getting married, he had been higher than a skyscraper. She had found out about all of this recently, after the wedding, and even then she had tried to make it work for a week, but she just couldn't bring herself to accept this new version of him. He was not even ready to let her leave because he claimed that he was in love with her, and he knew that he had found her soulmate, which is why he had convinced her to marry him, and he believed that now that she was finally with him, he could turn his life around and all she had to do was just stick by him forever. But let alone forever, Michelle wasn't even willing to stick by him for another week. She had packed all her stuff while he was taking his post-joint nap so she wouldn't have to deal with his drama, since every time she had threatened to dump him and leave, he had started wailing and acting like a little baby, and she couldn't get away from him after that because of how he had started to beg her to stay every single time, and it was really pathetic. Michelle had been sobbing while telling me about all of this, and I actually felt bad for her because I'm sure it couldn't have been easy for her to find out about these things. But then again, she had only known him for 2 weeks, and it had been quite foolish of her to get married to him with such little information to go on. If she had even spoken to any of us about this, my husband and I would have warned her, but she chose to keep this a secret from us for some reason. After telling us about everything, she told me that she needed my help now because she wanted to get out of the situation anyhow. She said that she was in desperate need of a divorce attorney, and that she also wanted me to help her out because she wanted to sue him for damages, because of all the emotional distress that he had caused her with his lies and manipulation. I'm a lawyer myself, so I could understand why she had come to me, but I told her that there was no way on earth that I was going to take up this lawsuit. It was not just because of personal reasons, it was also because I thought it was partly her own fault as well. Besides, emotional distress was always really hard to prove in court, and I did not have the time to deal with her dramatic outburst. I had clients with real problems and lawsuits to deal with. I told her that the most that I could do for her was put her in touch with a good divorce attorney, and maybe they would be able to get an annulment, but other than that, I was not getting myself involved in this mess. I also told her that if she had just spoken to me about Josh and her relationship with him, I would have warned her about him, but at this point, I thought that it was her own fault for rushing into a marriage so quickly. At that point, I guess she realized that my husband and I knew that Josh was not a good guy, and then, all of a sudden, she started turning the situation around on us. She told me that if I had known all along that Josh was not the right kind of guy, I should have said something to her about it on the day that I saw her flirting with him for the first time when they met at brunch at my house. And all of a sudden, it was my fault that this had happened. She started yelling at me, saying that if I knew about Josh and the kind of person that he was, then I should have warned her and not let her take this forward. I found that really surprising because, like I said, I had no idea that she was even planning on going so far with him. I thought that they were just having a little bit of a flirtation at brunch, but after that, I assumed that she would be done with him. Besides, even if I had not wanted her, she should have had the common sense of knowing that she should not get married to a guy that she has barely even known for 2 weeks. She knew nothing about him and yet she went ahead with him. I think that's pretty much her fault, not mine. So we ended up in a pretty nasty fight and she started accusing me of not warning her on purpose because I wanted to mess with her. It was just ridiculous and stupid, and I tried to explain to her that this was not the case at all, but she was just not ready to hear me out. She kept screaming at me, and after a while, she started telling me that now, I owed it to her to help her out with the legal process for free, and I had to make sure that not only did she in that marriage, but she also managed to sue him for damages. She expected me to help her out because she thought that this was all my fault for not wanting her in the first place when I saw them flirting that day. We kept arguing in circles for a while, but after that, I got really tired of talking to her, so I asked her to leave, and when she refused, I started threatening to call the cops, and that's when she finally left. But even after that, she hasn't stopped bothering me, and the entire day today, she has been trying to call me and text me. I have blocked her, but she's using a burner phone and creating multiple accounts to talk to me, and I just don't know how to shake her off. My parents are no help in this situation either because they also think that I should help her out because she's family, and the fact that I'm holding her accountable is victim blaming according to them. I don't think that's the same thing. I think I'm just calling her out on her stupidity, and she's not a victim of anything apart from her own idiotic decisions. Anyway, I just want to know, Ida, for not warning my sister about my husband's creepy cousin and helping her out with her lawsuit? Update 1. So it has been 3 days since my sister visited me, and since then, she has been trying to get on my very last nerve nonstop. I don't know why she feels like she is entitled to my legal help for free, but I decided to visit my parents today and make it very clear to her that I was not helping her out under any circumstances. I knew for a fact that after she had left the other day, she had obviously gone to live with our parents because, according to what she had told me, she had ended the lease on her apartment the day after she got married, and she couldn't exactly go back there because she had had a huge fight with her landlord because she refused to pay the rest of the rent that she owed for this month. He let her go, but he blacklisted her, so she couldn't return, and obviously there was no way that she was going back to stay with Joshua. The only place that was left for her to go to was our parents, and of course, I found her there when I visited them today after work. She was actually the one who opened the door to me, and as soon as she saw me standing outside, she slammed the door shut in my face. I patiently waited outside for somebody to open the door once again, and then, my mom let me in. When I finally went in, Michelle was no longer anywhere in my sight, and my parents told me that she had locked herself in her room because she did not want to see me. It was really weird that she did not want to see me, but she still wanted my help. But anyway, I told my parents about what had been going on and how she had been bothering me nonstop and that I needed them to put an end to it. And they told me something very surprising, that apparently, they had already put my sister in touch with a lawyer, and they were in the process of filing for lawsuit against Josh for all the emotional distress that he had caused her, and they were also going to be separated soon enough. So she really did not need my help as such, but when I asked my parents why she was still texting me and calling me if she did not even need my legal advice, they told me that she just wanted me to acknowledge the fact that I had messed up. Basically, she was doing all this and being so extra because she wanted an apology out of me, and there was no way on earth that she was getting one. The bottom line is that I'm not really sorry because she messed things up for herself. I had nothing to do with any of that. And for her to expect me to apologize and then start crying about it when I don't, it's just entitlement at its best, and I was just not having it. I tried to explain to my parents that I was caught up with preparing for my wedding and stuff. Of course, the only thing on my mind was not going to be Josh and Michelle. Especially when I didn't even think that there was anything going on between them, and I was so sick of repeating that over and over again that I ended up getting a bit loud. My parents also looked pretty exhausted, and they told me that they really did not want to get involved in this because so far, we had always been able to manage our own differences and deal with them like adults, and they would expect us to do the same even now. But the only thing they wanted to tell me was that Michelle was just disappointed that I hadn't been looking out for her because, as her older sister, she had always believed that I would get her out of trouble, no matter what. But now, it felt like I was just interested in making her out to be an irresponsible brat, and she already felt stupid and worthless after everything that had happened. My reaction had just made it worse. That is why she had expected an apology out of me, and they were on her side on this one, that I had been really harsh on her, given the circumstances that she was facing right now. They expected me to go easy on her and cut her some slack after everything that she was going through, but instead, I had started victim blaming, and they really didn't think that it was a nice thing to do. And then, they called me out for yelling at them for something that was not even their fault, and told me that if this was the tone that I was going to take with them, then they would prefer for me to leave because they did not want any unnecessary drama. It was really frustrating for me to deal with the situation at the time, because it felt like they were just simply refusing to see my point and were bent on making me look like the bad guy here, even though I hadn't done anything to deserve that. But I did not want to lose my temper even more and give them more reasons to make me the villain, so I tried not to say anything else and just left. After I came back home, I discussed it all with my husband, and thankfully, at least he's on my side here. I'm obviously not very happy about how the situation has turned out with my family, and I feel like I'm being pushed to a corner, but I still don't think that I'm wrong. I'm just exhausted, to be really honest, and I want things to go back to being the way they used to be before all this. Update 2. Hey, so it has been 2 weeks since my last visit to my parents' place, and after that visit, my sister did not make any attempts to contact me. There was just radio silence from Michelle, and my parents also did not bother to try and get in touch with me. I felt a little upset about it, but there was really not much that I could do. And in a couple of days, I'm gonna be leaving for my honeymoon anyway, so I decided to move past that episode and try to focus on the future, because I knew for a fact that there was no good that was going to come out of thinking about what had already happened. I knew that I had not done anything wrong, and I was going to stick to that. And my husband was on my side, so that's all that I really needed. But today, when I came back home, my husband was already there, and along with him, my parents and Michelle were also waiting for me in the living room. When I walked into the house, quite unexpectedly, Michelle literally launched herself at me and hugged me and did not let me go for almost 2 minutes. I was really shocked, but eventually, I heard her back and I ended up crying, because regardless of everything that happened, she was still my sister. She was still the little girl who looked up to me for everything since she was a kid, and this was probably the worst fight that we had had in ages. But then again, what are families there for if not pulling you through your darkest times? After the hug, she immediately started apologizing to me profusely and told me that it had taken her a really long time to keep her ego aside and accept the fact that she had messed up and none of this was really my fault, but she was just looking for somebody to blame because she couldn't accept that she had been so stupid. After she realized, she did not waste a second in coming to me, and she had even convinced our parents that they had been wrong for siding with her. She realized that because I was the older sibling, I had always been treated as more mature, and that's why I had been forced to grow up and always forgive everyone. But this one time that I had decided to put my foot down, it was up to them to make it up to me and not let this relationship go. After that, we ended up having a really long chat about everything that happened in the past couple of weeks, and my parents acknowledged the fact that because Michelle was younger, she always got away with a lot of stuff and they hadn't even realized it until she herself brought it up with them. My parents also apologized to me for trying to make me look like the bad guy and said that they had been wrong all along and promised me that they would try to be better now. They also seemed to get really emotional, and I'm getting these 2 weeks of no contact with my family must have been difficult for them as well. All of them seem to be really upset and apologetic about everything that has happened, and I can't say that I've already forgiven them and put everything in the past, but I would like to do that. After all, I believe that families should stick together, and I want to give them a second chance. Whether that's going to be a good decision or a bad one, that's for us to find out later, but until then, I want to try. Anyway, Michelle is getting a divorce and it's coming along well for her. She decided to drop the idea of filing a lawsuit against him for damages because it was going to be really hard to prove, and she did not have that kind of time for any of this. She also acknowledged that she had been stupid and this was really her fault for being so reckless her entire life. But now that she had had to face such severe consequences, she was probably going to think twice and become a little more responsible instead of still being the wild child of the family. And I'm glad that she was able to come to the conclusion. I think it's about time that she did. All of us sat together and talked for a while before it was time for everyone to leave, and surprisingly, since I was leaving for my honeymoon in a couple of days, they told me that all 3 of them had pooled together some money and they would love to finance the trip. I was a bit skeptical, but then they told me that they really wanted to make it up to me, and after some convincing, they transferred the money to my account, so that was a really nice and sweet gesture, and I'm gonna keep that in mind while my husband and I are traveling. For now, we are just looking forward to the honeymoon and hope that everything goes well with my family and that the second chance that I've given them is not something that I end up regretting. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Update 3. Hey, everyone. It has been close to 2 years since I posted an update, but I guess what I found out recently, it's worth posting. So my husband and I are pregnant and I'm in my 2nd trimester now. I randomly thought about posting here all of a sudden today, and well, here I am. I know a lot of you must be curious about how things turned out to be with my family, and I'm really happy to tell you guys that it turned out well. Ever since I had that last fallout with them 2 years ago, they had been on their best behavior, and Michelle and I still have some disagreements sometimes, but we always make it up to each other, and it's never as severe as what happened 2 years back. Everybody in the family is really excited for the baby. Of course, my husband and I are really excited to be embracing parenthood. My in-laws and my parents are also really excited to become grandparents for the first time, but most of all, it's Michelle, who is excited to become an aunt and has been visiting us every other day, taking really good care of me, reading all the books that I read, and just being there for me all the time. I'm really grateful that I decided to give them a second chance, because I wouldn't trade this experience for anything in the world. And I know for a fact that my baby is going to be just as loved as I am, if not more.